Alien warrior expected him to betray her. His loyalty changed everything. The penal transport vessel Retribution hurtled through the acid-streaked clouds of Mirian, its hull ablaze, klaxons howling a symphony of doom. Steel bulkheads shrieked in protest as the vessel bucked and trembled, fragments of metal sparking away into the storm-churned darkness outside. Inside, chaos reigned, shouting prisoners pressed against magnetic restraints, smoke curling from shattered consoles, and the sharp, tangy scent of ozone mingling with the copper of blood. Nasira pressed herself against the trembling wall, one hand clamped over a deep gash along her ribs. Blood welled between her fingers, slicking her midnight blue and crimson-scaled skin, soaking the remnants of her once ornate armor. Her breath came in ragged gasps, every movement a torture. Still, she held her head high, icy eyes burning beneath the crusted blood on her brow, a survivor clinging to the last shreds of pride. A shard of memory flashed, her clan's citadel, torches guttering in the rain, screams echoing down stone corridors. The night clan Draith fell, her family slaughtered, her world razed by Lord Malvec's treachery. She had fought until her sword broke, until the last ember of hope guttered out. Now, stripped of title and power, she was only another prisoner, shackled and caged among the galaxy's forsaken. The ship lurched, throwing her against the restraints. Sparks cascaded from a ruptured power conduit, and somewhere deeper in the vessel, a cryo-chamber hissed open. Amid the chaos, a figure stepped from the swirling mist, tall, broad-shouldered, hair tangled in dark knots. His face was all harsh angles and stubble, eyes flat and hard as frostbitten steel. He moved like a man who expected danger in every shadow, each step calculated, purposeful. He took in the chaos with a soldier's calm, ignoring the shrieking prisoners and the flickering lights. His gaze landed on Nasira, taking in the scales, the wound, the stubborn lift of her chin. "You're Draith," he said, voice rough as gravel, neither question nor accusation. Nasira tried to answer, the words tangled behind her teeth, but pain stole her breath. Before she could speak, the hull gave way with a wrenching scream. The world pitched, then hurled them both into oblivion as the Retribution crashed down. Blackness swallowed everything. She surfaced by degrees, sirens distorting into silence, heat fading into numbness. The sharp stink of smoke and burning alloys bit at her nostrils. Somewhere nearby, metal groaned and settled. She opened her eyes. The world was sideways, blurred. A hand gripped her shoulder, shook her back into the world. The human's face swam into view, eyes hard, jaw set. "Stay with me," he snapped, and pressed a torn cloth to her side. Pain flared, bringing clarity. Outside, the comms crackled. The voice of Warden Surlan oozed from the speakers, warped by static, sinister even through the distortion. "Enjoy the welcome party, prisoners. Mirian's beasts will finish what the crash began." Reed, she saw the name stitched in faded thread on his battered jumpsuit, hauled himself upright. He moved to a ragged rent in the hull, pried it wider, and sniffed the rank, chemical-laden air. "Breathable for now," he said, voice flat, as a tremor rippled beneath their feet. From the gloom outside came a guttural roar, so deep it rattled the fragments of the ship. Nasira forced herself up, ignoring the fire licking her side. Her hand dropped to the slender blade sheathed at her hip, bone charms dangling. Reed's eyes flicked to her, gauging, measuring. "Can you fight?" he asked. She bared her teeth, shoulders squared in defiance. "I am Draith. We do not yield." The words had barely left her lips when something massive slammed into the hull. Steel screeched. A beast crashed through. A hulking thing, skin slick and scaled, eyes glowing with ravenous hunger, claws like serrated blades. It lunged, jaws snapping. Reed didn't hesitate. He snatched a jagged length of hull plate, brandishing it like a spear, circling to draw the creature's focus. Move! Nisira darted in, a phantom in crimson and midnight. She slashed beneath the beast's outstretched limb, a spray of black ichor hissing as it struck her blade. The creature roared, lashing out, but she was already gone, ducking beneath the swipe, stabbing deep. Reed drove his makeshift weapon into the thing's neck with brutal efficiency. The beast convulsed, then collapsed with a final shuddering groan. Breathing hard, they surveyed the wreck. Beyond the ruined hull, more eyes glimmered in the storm-lit dark. Shadows slunk closer, drawn by blood and ruin. Nisira's grip tightened on her blade. Reed scanned the debris, snatching packs and canisters, stuffing them into a sack. We move. Now. With the wounded dignity of the hunted, Nisira followed him into the dying light. The petrified woodlands loomed, trunks twisted into grotesque shapes, branches like skeletal arms clawing at the sky. They ducked into a gash in the rock, a cave, cold and deep, swallowing them in shadow. The air bit at her wounds, icy and clean compared to the smoke outside. Inside, the silence was absolute, save for the ragged edge of their breathing. Nisira slumped against the wall, trembling, blood still seeping through her fingers. Reed knelt beside her, tearing a strip from his sleeve. His hands were quick, movements brisk and practiced. No gentleness, only purpose. Hold still, he muttered, binding the wound tight. His touch was firm, impersonal, but the warmth of his skin beneath her scales surprised her. She braced herself, wary, yet found herself leaning in, drawn by necessity. "You could end me while I sleep," she said, voice low, testing. He didn't flinch. "I could, but I'd freeze alone." Blunt, honest. It was an answer she could respect, if not trust. She edged closer, the heat of his body welcome in the cave's chill. Her blade stayed at hand, gleaming dully in the gloom. "Your record says murderer," she murmured, studying his eyes. He looked away, jaw clenched. That's what the court decided. No boast, no denial, just weary fact. In the darkness, the cave echoed with distant roars and the whisper of wind through ancient stone. Nisira closed her eyes, uncertain if she could trust the human at her side, yet survival demanded alliance, and the cold left little room for pride. So they huddled together, the last of Clan Draith and the convicted killer, united by necessity. In the blackness of Mirian's night, trust was a luxury neither could afford. Morning brought new peril. Nisira woke to the stinging ache in her side, the cold in her bones, and the muted, predatory sounds that set her senses alight. She froze, eyes narrowed in the gloom of the cave. Footsteps, careful, deliberate, echoed off the stone, accompanied by the low growl of voices, rough with hunger and intent. She nudged Reed, who was already awake, one hand gripping the bloodied length of hull plate he'd claimed as a weapon. He cocked his head, listening, eyes sharpening as the voices grew closer. "They're coming," Nisira whispered, voice barely audible. Reed's gaze flicked to the narrow side tunnel at the back of the cave. "We can slip out that way before they close in. Move quiet. Keep ahead of—" "No," Nisira cut him off, voice cold and defiant. "I will not flee from scum." Her words rang with iron conviction, even as her wound throbbed beneath the makeshift bandage. She would not run. Not now. Not from the likes of these. Reed studied her for a heartbeat, then nodded once. "All right. We stand. Together." Shadows flickered against the mouth of the cave, cast by the pale, acidic sunlight of Mirian's dawn. A gang of convicts filtered into view, weapons scavenged from the wreck, or fashioned from bone and metal. At their head strode a brute of a man, armored in piecemeal plating, face crisscrossed with scars. His eyes gleamed with cruel amusement. Nasira knew that face. Garen Roke, the butcher of Lorne. His name was a curse whispered even among Draith. Roke's laughter rolled off the stone, deep and mocking. Well, what's this? Draith royalty and her pet murderer. A fine find for our morning hunt. Reed's reply was icy, unflinching. Turn around, Roke. You know how this ends if you don't. Roke sneered. Oh, I know how it ends, with you bleeding out, and the Draith witch begging for mercy. He leveled a battered pistol at Nasira, finger tightening on the trigger. Surrender now. Maybe I'll let you live long enough to amuse my men. Nasira's grip tightened on her blade, her scales flaring with defiance. You are filth, Roke. Come and see how Draith die. The air crackled with tension. Then, all at once, the cave erupted into violence. Roke's men surged forward, roaring, weapons raised. Reed met them head-on, swinging his improvised spear in brutal arcs. Nasira darted between hulking bodies, her blade a silver flash, slicing through flesh and bone. The clash of metal, the snarls and cries of pain, echoed like thunder within the confined space. A convict lunged at Nasira from behind, a wiry woman with a rusted shiv. Nasira twisted, parried, and drove her knee into the attacker's gut. Another brute crashed into her, knocking her against the rock. Her wound screamed, her vision blurred, but she refused to fall. She slashed out, catching the man across the face. Reed fought beside her, movements precise and ruthless. He caught a pipe swung at his head, wrenched it away, and drove it into his assailant's chest. Blood splattered the cave floor, mixing with the dust and ash. But the odds pressed in. Too many, too desperate. Roke bellowed orders, driving his men into a frenzy. Nasira blocked a blow meant for her skull, but another convict barreled in, swinging a heavy wrench. She stumbled, vulnerable. Before the killing strike could fall, Reed was there, shoving her aside. The wrench crashed into his side with a sickening thud. He grunted, staggered, but didn't drop his weapon. With a savage yell, he drove the pipe through the attacker's throat, then turned, blood seeping down his jumpsuit. Nasira's heart hammered in her chest. For a moment, all she saw was crimson, the blood on Reed's side, the way he fought with the grim fury of a man with nothing left to lose. Roke snarled as his men fell back, the tide turning. He raised his pistol, aiming at Reed. Nasira lunged, blade flashing. The warlord fired. The shot went wide as she slashed across his arm. Roke cursed, stumbled back, and with a last glare of hatred, he and his few remaining followers bolted from the cave, dragging their wounded behind. Silence crashed down, broken only by the rasp of their breathing. Nasira dropped to her knees beside Reed, pressing her scaled hands to the bleeding wound in his side. You saved me, she whispered, her voice wavering with shock and something deeper. Not for advantage. You chose to. Reed gave a harsh, pained laugh. You're not expendable, Nasira. The words were simple, honest, and they cut through the armor she wore around her heart. She pressed harder against the wound, searching for something to bind it. As she worked, her eyes caught a faded mark beneath the blood, a tattoo, ancient and familiar. The sigil of Clan Draith, inked in silver and black, the dragon's eye, her family's symbol. Her breath caught. Her voice was barely a whisper. You're Callum Reed. His eyes met hers, shadowed by pain and old memories. I was. Once. My father's captain, she breathed, pieces falling into place. You vanished. Exiled by Malvec's order. Framed. Reed's jaw tightened. Malvec sent me away on a false mission. While I was gone, he staged the murders, framed me for the massacre of innocents on Sorath Station. The tribunal was Malvec's. He had witnesses, forged logs. I never saw your father again. Nasira's mind raced, anger and understanding mingling. He always said you would die before letting harm reach his kin. You swore it at my naming ceremony. I failed him. The words were raw, dragged from a well of guilt. I failed all of you. No, Nasira said fiercely, bandaging his wound with what little they had. We were all betrayed. Malvek orchestrated everything. My family's murder, your exile, this prison planet. He wanted Draith destroyed. Reed's lips twisted into a bitter smile. And now here we are, two ghosts among monsters. She touched the tattoo again, tracing the lines with trembling fingers. She remembered the ceremony, her father's hand on her shoulder, Reed's voice echoing in the great hall. If Clan Draith falls, I will stand as shield and sword unto death. Her own words were soft, but resolute. We survived, we endure, and we make Malvek answer for what he's done. Reed met her gaze, a flicker of hope sparking in his stormy eyes. No more running. We see this through. Together. Suspicion, hard as diamond, began to melt into the beginnings of trust. Their alliance was still fragile, but no longer born only of necessity. Something deeper. Shared loss. Shared fury. Bound them now. Nasira finished tying off the bandage, her hands lingering a moment on his. Rest, she said. We'll need our strength. Reed exhaled, leaning back against the cave wall. You know, he said quietly, your father would have been proud. You fight like a Draith. A small, fierce smile touched her lips. And you, Captain, still keep your oath. They sat in silence as the morning light slanted through the cave mouth. The ghosts of their pasts retreating, if only for a moment. Above them, the planet remained hostile, the future uncertain. But for the first time since the fall of Clan Draith, Nasira did not feel alone. A fragile trust had formed, enough, perhaps, to spark a new beginning. Reed recovered enough to move, though each step was measured, his hand pressed to the fresh bandage on his side. The cave, once a bleak shelter against monsters and men, became their base. Walls scored with old claw marks, floor scattered with the detritus of survival. Nasira set traps at the entrance for beasts or worse. She scavenged with sharp eyes, every movement precise, haunted by the memory of blood and fire. Yet there was unfinished business between them. She watched Reed as he tended their meager supplies, jaw set, shoulders tense beneath the filth of his jumpsuit. The silence stretched until it was nearly unbearable. Tell me everything, Nasira demanded at last, her voice echoing in the gloom. The night my family died. Do not spare me, Captain. I want the truth, no matter how much it burns. Reed's eyes, as cold as Miriam's winds, met hers. He set aside a battered canteen, hands steady but for the faintest tremor. You deserve nothing less. He began with the guards, men and women he'd trusted, their loyalty bought in the shadows by Malvek's gold. They opened the gates before dawn, he said, voice low, flat with remembered horror. Your father's personal guard. They let Malvek's men through the eastern wing. By the time the alarm sounded, it was too late. Nasira's fists clenched in her lap, claws biting into her own palms. Was it quick? Reed's jaw flexed, but he did not look away. No. Malvek wanted to make an example. The slaughter was swift, but not merciful. Your mother stood with sword in hand at the inner doors. She never begged. Your brothers died fighting. Even the servants. Malvek left none alive, save those he needed to pin blame on me. She bowed her head, black-blue hair falling forward to hide the shimmer in her eyes. Guilt coiled in her chest, tight and suffocating. I should have been there. I should have... Stop, Reed said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. If you had died with them, Malvek would have won completely. Your survival gives purpose to their sacrifice. Nisira forced herself to meet his gaze, searching for anger and finding only sorrow. "And what of you, Captain? You were exiled. Framed. You lost everything because of us." "I lost nothing that mattered," he replied. "What mattered was Draith, protecting you. I failed that, but I can still fight for what remains." Silence pulsed between them, thick with memory and unspoken forgiveness. At last Nisira breathed out, voice rough. "Then let us fight with open eyes, not just for vengeance, but for justice." They turned their attention to Mirian itself, mapping out what they knew. The penal colony was a lie, masking a deeper, darker purpose. Reed had pieced it together during his brief stint in the labor gangs. Nisira had overheard rumors, snatches of conversation in every tongue of the Outlands. "Mirian is more than a dumping ground," Reed explained, tracing lines in the dust with a broken stick. "Malvec's men oversee every shift. They push the convicts into the mines, deep beneath the petrified forests. They're after something specific." "Draith stones," Nisira said softly, recognition dawning. "The heart of our civilization's power. Our engines, our shields, our weapons, everything that made Draith strong. My father guarded the veins as sacred." Reed nodded. "Malvec's coup was never about a throne. He wanted to erase Draith. Wipe out your bloodline, seize the stones, and bury the truth beneath a world no one dares to visit." Nisira's claws traced the cave wall, scales glimmering faintly in the gloom. "Erasure, not just murder. He would see us forgotten. Our people, our history, our power." "That's why we need proof," Reed said. "Not rumors, not vengeance. If we can get inside the main shaft, gather evidence, schematics, transmission logs, anything, then broadcast it off-world, we can break Malvec's hold. Force the galaxy to see the truth." Nisira tilted her head, sharp and calculating. "The guards are everywhere. Drones patrol the tunnels. No one gets in or out without a labor mark. Even if we make it inside, the comms are locked down tight." Reed's lips quirked in a grim smile. "There's always a way. We'll need disguises, tools, an exit plan. If we're caught, they'll feed us to the scavengers." She laughed, low and fierce. If it were easy, it would not honor Draith. For the first time since her family's fall, a genuine smile crossed her face, sharp and true. Reed's answering smile was quick, almost boyish beneath the scars. They spent hours planning, cataloging what little they had, sketching escape routes and infiltration points. Reed described the shifts, the rotation of guards, the weak spots in the outer fences. Nisira remembered the old mining codes, the emergency protocols her father once made her memorize. Piece by piece, they built a plan out of hope and desperation. As dusk edged its way into the cave, Nisira paused, studying Reed in the growing gloom. His silhouette was broad, still marked by pain but unbowed. She found herself wondering, for the first time, what came after. "When this ends," she asked quietly, "what then?" "When Malvec is exposed, when Draith stones are safe, what becomes of us?" Reed's answer was softer than the cave's shadows. "We rebuild. Together." The word lingered between them, heavy with promise and possibility. Nisira searched his face, seeing the truth there. Not just duty, but something deeper. Something that had survived betrayal, exile, and the cold emptiness of loss. For the first time in years, hope flickered in her chest. She nodded, a slow smile curving her lips. "Together, then." In the silence that followed, their resolve solidified, no longer just survivors, but partners with a purpose. The cave felt less like a tomb, and more like a beginning. Side by side, Nisira and Reed prepared for the fight ahead, the promise of a future binding them as tightly as any oath. Their journey to the mines was fraught with danger from the very first step. Reed and Nasira moved through Miriam's scarred wasteland under the poison-orange sky, the world's ruin stretching out in all directions. Acid rain had warped the petrified trees into twisted claws. Every few hundred paces they ducked behind shattered monoliths or the carcass of some ancient mining rig, watching as columns of prisoners were herded through the dust by mercenaries in black armor. These men bore Malvec's crest and no mercy. Any straggler was beaten or shot where they stumbled. Nasira and Reed kept low, slipping among shadows and keeping their stolen uniforms loose over their true selves. The air was thick with the scent of scorched rock, blood, and the faint electric tang of Draith stones. Even beneath layers of scavenged fabric, Nasira shivered as she felt the stone's resonance, a song that vibrated in her bones and pulled at her very soul. They reached a ridge overlooking the main pit as a convoy rumbled below, engines snarling. The mining operation was far larger than either had imagined. Trenches and tunnels radiated out from a central maw in the earth. Prisoners, gaunt and hollow-eyed, staggered under heavy loads, while drones hovered overhead, scanning for escapees. Every access point was manned by Malvec's private soldiers, weapons trained on the suffering below. Reed pressed a hand to Nasira's arm as she watched, eyes cold with fury. "It's worse than the rumors," he said, voice rough. "He's bleeding the world dry." Nasira's jaw clenched. "He'll erase Draith itself if he succeeds." Her gaze sharpened, turning inward. "The stones. I can feel them. They're close. This way." Relying on her uncanny sense, they circled the perimeter and found a rusted maintenance hatch half concealed by debris. Nasira pressed her palm to the metal, scales flickering as she tuned herself to the frequency of the stones. The hatch's lock shuddered and clicked open. She sagged, breathless, but Reed steadied her. "Save your strength," he murmured. "We'll need it inside." The shaft beyond was narrow and pitch black. They crawled through grime and piping, Nasira's senses guiding them deeper while the vibration of the Draith stones grew stronger, more insistent. Each foot forward sapped her energy, the song rising to a fever pitch inside her skull. Reed watched her with concern. "Can you keep going?" Nasira's lips curled in determination. "We have to." The passage ended behind a mesh grate. Below, lights glared over the mine's control hub, banks of screens, armed guards, and the centerpiece, a vault holding raw Draith stones, glowing with eerie blue fire. The room hummed with energy and despair. They waited for a lull in the patrols, then slipped down a service ladder. Nasira muffled a gasp as the stone's resonance surged, her hands trembling with the effort to keep herself together. Reed led the way, moving silent and lethal, disabling 2 guards with quick, practiced strikes. At the main console, Nasira's fingers danced over alien keys, security logs, mining schedules, transport manifests, all with Malvec's signature. Then, tucked in a hidden directory, she found it. A voice recording marked for deletion. Malvec's tone was smooth, venomous, utterly cold. "Once the final shipment is secured, initiate the purge. Detonate the core. Leave no trace, no witnesses, no stones, no Draith. Miriam must be erased, as if it never existed." Nasira's breath caught, pain and rage colliding inside her. She transferred the files to a portable drive, heart hammering as red warning lights blinked to life on the console. Alarms blared, a shrill cacophony that shattered the tense quiet. The blast doors slammed open, and mercenaries stormed in, guns drawn. Reed reacted instantly, shoving Nasira behind a console as plasma bolts seared the air. "Get to the viewport," he shouted. Nasira closed her eyes, letting the stone's resonance flow through her, not fighting, but channeling. The air crackled as she raised her hands, releasing a wave of harmonic force that knocked the mercenaries back, stunning them long enough for her and Reed to dash for the wide, reinforced window overlooking the pit. Reed grabbed a steel pipe, swinging it in a wide arc to smash the glass. Alarms screamed louder as the pressure difference sucked them out onto the gantries above the chaos below. The world outside was pure bedlam. Prisoners, emboldened by the chaos, rose up against their captors. Explosions blossomed in the pit, and the thunder of revolt shook the steel walkways. Reed and Nisira landed hard, rolling to their feet as a rain of debris and gunfire descended. They ran along the gantries, fighting their way through the riot. Nisira's blade flashed silver and crimson as she cut down a guard who tried to block their escape. Reed moved beside her, every motion coordinated as if they'd fought together for a lifetime, his stolen sidearm barking, his body always between her and the greatest danger. A mercenary lunged at Nisira, pinning her against the rails. She twisted, but the man's grip was iron. Suddenly Reed was there, wrenching the attacker away, taking a blow meant for her on his already injured side. He grunted, teeth clenched but didn't falter. He drove his elbow into the mercenary's throat, then pulled Nisira to her feet. "Stay with me," he shouted over the roar. Nisira's vision blurred. The stone song threatened to overwhelm her, every step heavier than the last. She faltered at the next junction, knees buckling. Reed caught her under one arm, holding her up even as plasma fire burned past his head. "You're not leaving me behind," he growled, eyes fierce with promise. They pressed on, dodging falling bodies, overturned carts, and flames that leapt from ruptured fuel lines. A squad of mercenaries tried to cut them off. Nisira focused, channeled a burst of energy that sent the men sprawling, but the cost was high. Her strength faded, the world tilting. Reed lifted her, half carrying her through the chaos. She clung to him, the last of her suspicion breaking apart under the weight of his courage. With every risk he took, every wound he endured to shield her, she felt something new take root, a fragile but undeniable trust. A final gauntlet waited at the exit. The main blast doors were closing, sealing the pit for destruction. "Go!" Reed yelled, shoving Nisira through the narrowing gap. He dove after her, just as the doors crashed shut, the thunder of revolt and collapsing machinery echoing behind them. They tumbled into the open air, battered, breathless, alive. Nisira pushed herself up, meeting Reed's gaze. "Why risk so much? For me?" she demanded, voice hoarse. Reed's answer was simple, raw. "Because I choose to? Always." In that moment, the last of her old doubts dissolved. They stood together, forged by danger and the fire of rebellion, ready to face whatever storm Malvek unleashed next. Their route to the comms array was choked with smoke and chaos, the sky above the mines rippling with the unstable blue glow of Draith stones pushed past their limits. Nisira and Reed sprinted across ruined walkways, the data chip clutched in Reed's fist, the only hope of exposing Malvek's crimes before the world turned to ash. They rounded a twisted bulkhead, only to find their way blocked by Roke and his battered gang, weapons leveled. Roke's face was split by a wolfish grin, blood smearing the scars on his jaw. "Going somewhere, Draith?" Roke called, stepping into the path. His men fanned out, their eyes hungry, desperate. "Hand over the chip, and maybe you live to see another sunrise." Reed shifted protectively in front of Nisira, jaw clenched. "You're wasting time, Roke. That chip's the only thing that'll save any of us." Roke barked a short, mirthless laugh. "Save us? It'll make me king of the ashes." "You want through? You bargain. With me." Nisira met Roke's gaze, voice cold as starlight. "You'd rule nothing but dust. Malvex triggered the core. This planet is dying." Roke's sneer faltered, but before he could retort, the sharp report of gunfire echoed from above. Mercenaries burst from the shadows, Malvec's men, helmets gleaming, rifles raised. "All of you, down!" their commanders shouted, voice amplified and merciless. Sudden chaos erupted. Roke's gang fired back, desperate to survive. Explosions rocked the scaffold as prisoners, mercenaries, and Roke's followers clashed in the dust and ruin. Reed seized Nasira's hand. "Now!" he hissed. They slipped through the melee, ducking under swinging pipes and leaping over collapsed crates. The comms array loomed ahead, a spire of black metal bristling with dish and antennae, its entrance guarded by a pair of mercenaries already distracted by Roke's men. They darted toward the tower, nearly clear, when the mercenary commander spotted them, blue visor flaring. "There! Stop them!" the commander shouted, firing a pulse that seared the air inches from Nasira's head. Reed spun, raising his sidearm, but before he could fire, Roke crashed into the commander from behind, a bellow of rage on his lips. The two men grappled, Roke's blade flashing as he drove it into the commander's side. "Run!" Roke roared at Nasira, blood bubbling from his lips. "Make it count!" For a heartbeat, Nasira's eyes met Roke's, recognition passing between enemies, a last strange kinship forged in desperation. She nodded once, then turned and ran, dragging Reed behind her. Inside the comms tower, the world narrowed to adrenaline and purpose. Reed slid the data chip into the terminal, fingers flying over the keys as the screen filled with encrypted files and frantic warnings. "Uploading," he muttered. "Almost there. Malvec's network is fighting back. Give me time." Nasira pressed her hands to the wall, feeling the hum beneath the metal, the Draith stone's agony echoing through every strut. Her breath caught. "Reed, the stones. They're unraveling. If I don't calm them, the core will detonate before the message gets out." Reed's gaze snapped up. "Nasira, you can't—" "I have to." She stepped to the shattered edge of the tower's observation deck, the mines sprawling below like a wound in the world. The air vibrated with the stone's song, wild, discordant, on the edge of madness. She closed her eyes, centering herself, the memory of her father's voice rising in her mind. She began to sing, not words, but a melody older than language, woven from the heart of Draith itself. The notes shimmered, piercing the chaos, threading through the stone veins far below. Light spilled from her outstretched hands, silver and blue, bathing her scaled skin and bone armor in radiant glow. Outside, the mines buckled. Fissures closed, then held, just barely, at her command. The wild energy slowed, soothed by the force of her will. Reed watched, heart pounding, helpless but resolute. "Hold on, Nasira, just a little longer. Upload's at 90%. The stones fought her, their agony bleeding into her bones. Every heartbeat was a battle, her voice growing hoarse as she poured every ounce of herself into the song. The world narrowed to pain and music, the storm of energy channeled through her slender, muscular form. Reed shouted encouragement, his voice cutting through her haze. "You're doing it. Nasira, just a breath more." The console chimed. "Upload complete," the computer intoned. Nasira's song faltered. Her knees buckled, the light around her flickering. Reed caught her as she collapsed, pulling her into his arms. She was trembling, her face slick with sweat and tears. "I've got you," he whispered fiercely. "You did it. You saved them." A deep tremor shook the tower. Sirens wailed, and the mines below erupted in blue fire, the Draith stones at last breaking free. Reed scooped Nasira up, running for the emergency lift as the comms array began to shudder and crack. Flames and debris fell as he carried her through the choking corridors, the world collapsing behind them. He found a shuttle, one of Malvec's sleek black vessels, half-fueled, its hatch barely open. He laid Nasira gently inside, her breathing shallow but steady, then dove for the controls. With a roar of engines, the shuttle blasted into the sky, leaving the dying planet in their wake. Through the viewport, Miriam's surface twisted, the mines consuming themselves in a storm of sapphire fire. Reed gathered Nisera close, her head resting on his shoulder, the weight of survival and hope mingling between them. "It's over," he breathed. "We made it." Behind them, Miriam burned. But their future, shaped by courage, sacrifice, and the light of Draith, had only just begun. In the cramped shuttle cabin, Nasira stirred, breath catching as consciousness returned. The ache in her limbs was familiar, but the suffocating pressure of Miriam's core was gone, replaced by the muted hum of engines and the soft, ceaseless pulse of flight. She blinked against the harsh overhead light, awareness snapping into focus as she remembered. The stone's wild agony, her song, the searing brightness of collapse. Reed sat at the controls, face drawn and shadowed, watching her. As she shifted, he glanced over, relief softening the hard lines of his expression. "Welcome back," he murmured. She tried to speak, voice raw. "Did we?" He nodded, exhaustion warring with the spark of triumph in his eyes. "We did. Look." He turned the comm screen toward her. Across its surface, sector-wide alerts bloomed. Official seals, emergency banners, the faces of once untouchable ministers now overlaid with warrants. Headlines crawled past in half a dozen languages. Malvec's atrocities revealed, Draith bloodline lives, revolt on Mirian, tyrant flees as regime collapses. Reed scrolled through transmissions, prisoners freed, uprisings in systems once loyal to Malvec, old allies rallying behind the Draith banner. "Your evidence is everywhere. No more secrets. Malvec's running, and every world in the sector is hunting him now." Nasira pressed a trembling hand to her lips, grief and vindication burning together. Her family's deaths, her people's erasure, had not been in vain. Justice had found its voice, and it rang out from every corner of the stars. She turned to Reed, the last embers of suspicion finally extinguished, replaced by something fierce and warm. "My father was right about you," she said quietly. "Loyal as the old world." He let out a tired laugh, scrubbing a hand over his face. "And stubborn as stone, or so I'm told." His gaze lingered on her, softer than she'd ever seen. "I would have followed you through fire. I did." She reached across the narrow space, her scaled fingers curling around his battered hand. The scars, the calluses, the memory of every battle fought at her side. They were all there, real and unbreakable. He squeezed her hand, rough thumb tracing the line of her knuckles. "You led us through it. Not just me. Everyone you touched. Prisoners, soldiers, even Roke in the end. Your strength pulled us all out of the dark." She shook her head, smile curling at the edge of her lips. "We did this together, always together." Her eyes shimmered, silver and storm bright. "Will you stay? When the world turns again, and the Draith are remembered?" He leaned in, his forehead coming to rest against hers in the ancient Draith gesture of trust. The world fell away, just the two of them. No war, no vengeance, only shared breath and the unspoken bond they'd forged in the crucible of survival. "Together," he promised, voice low and sure. "From now until the stars go dark." For a moment, neither spoke. The comms continued their litany of revolution and renewal, but Nasira's heart was quiet, filled with something deeper than triumph. Hope. The kind her father had spoken of when the night was long and the fires guttered low. A hope that endured loss, betrayal, even exile. Reed brushed a stray lock of black-blue hair from her face. "What now, Lady Draith?" She smiled, A true, unburdened thing. Now we rebuild. The Draith stones need guardians, the freed need leaders, and I. She hesitated, the words tasting unfamiliar, precious. I need you. His answering smile was slow, a promise blooming behind tired eyes. Then that's what we'll do. I'll be at your side. Captain, shield, or stubborn fool. Take your pick. Nasira laughed, the sound surprising both of them. She leaned into him, pressing her forehead more firmly to his. You are all of those, and more. Outside the viewport, the black of space stretched on forever, the embers of Miriam's destruction fading behind. The old world was gone, but a new dawn waited. Uncertain, unwritten, but theirs to claim. She closed her eyes, letting the quiet settle over her hand still wrapped in reeds. For the first time since her clan had fallen, Nasira felt whole. She had gained justice for her family, hope for her people, and the most unlikely love, a bond born not of circumstance, but of choice. Reed's loyalty had restored not just her house, but her heart. In the endless night they were no longer alone. Together they were survivors, partners, and at last, beloved. Reborn beneath the cold stars, ready to face whatever the new day would bring. That's the end of the story. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and write in the comments what you liked most about this story. Our team will be very grateful to you. You can find even more fascinating stories on our channel. See you in the next video.